Hello everyone, Spectre here. For about the last year or so now, we've been hearing countless rumors that Halo Studios has been silently working on a remaster of Halo Combat Evolved. Well, a couple of weeks ago, these rumors were put to rest, and we got our first look at the remaster for Halo Combat Evolved. And of course, like all things on the internet, people's reactions were rather divided. So let's talk about it. To kick things off, first of all, I feel like everything that we've seen has been really positive and has gotten me really excited about the game. Sure, there's some negatives here and there, but most of them are either nitpicks or stuff that's work in progress. Something that's important to keep in mind is that this game still has another year in development and everything is still subject to change. The first area that I want to give praise is the game's cinematics. They look absolutely fantastic, reminding me a lot of the cutscenes that Blur Studios ended up making for Halo 2 Anniversary, especially coming off of Halo Infinite, which focused on having one continuous shot for all of the cutscenes. While I don't hate it as much as many other people, it did sacrifice a lot of its cinematic flair. This issue appears to have been rectified with this remake, which is an important thing to note. This game is a full remake, not a remaster, meaning that it isn't just the old game with a fresh coat of paint slapped on it. The game has been remade from the ground up, including multiple new additions, which is where we have some of our issues. The two most notable are the lack of the classic health system and the return of sprint. Now, first off, this might be a bit of a hot take, but I don't actually hate sprint in Halo. Now, before you unsubscribe and dislike the video, let me explain. You see, I feel like most of Sprint's issues primarily stem from the game's multiplayer. You see, the classic Halo games were built with the idea of your gun always being up and at the ready. Another design that was made to account for this was the fact that your base movement speed was already increased. So with the addition of Sprint in Halo Reach, the base movement speed was toned down. Now, of course, when you're using Sprint, it would still take roughly the same amount of time to get from point A to B in a given map, except now there's a new issue: sprint to fire speed. You see, one of the core gameplay design philosophies in the original games was keeping your gun at the ready. With the inclusion of sprints, you can no longer do that. Additionally, with maps having to be designed with sprint in mind, that also meant that a lot of maps had to be scaled up to account for sprint. The problem is that a lot of these bigger maps would oftentimes favor precision weapons. While precision weapons have always been effective in Halo, there was still room for other weapons in the sandbox. The problem is in a lot of these sprint-based Halo games, precision weapons tended to dominate everything else. While sprint would seem like a very minor change, it would fundamentally change the core gameplay of Halo, and not necessarily for the better. You see, Halo was always known for its varied sandbox. Every weapon had a role to play, but with a lot of these sprint-oriented Halo games, a lot of these weapons just wouldn't get their chance in the spotlight. Additionally, that also meant that a lot of playstyles just simply weren't viable anymore, leaving only precision-based weapons to be the only viable choice. As you can see, the inclusion of sprint had a massive impact on the overall gameplay of Halo. Now, notice so far that I've only talked about the game's multiplayer design, not its campaign. You see, sprint has a very different problem in the game's campaign than it does multiplayer. Halo's campaign was very intentionally designed. You see, it required the player to make very strategic choices in what weapons they had in their arsenal. But you see, there's another key pillar to this: positioning. You see, especially with the old health system, it really made the player think about where they were standing and how they approached encounters. A good example of this is if the player was standing out in the open. They would take a lot of fire, which could lead to their shields going down. This meant that if they didn't find cover quickly, they would be losing health, which they would be punished for until they could find a health pack. So how does sprint factor into the equation? You see, it would allow the player to, for lack of a better way of wording it, simply run away from the fight. The player no longer has to pay attention to their positioning. Now they can simply run into the fight and run out of it when they need. Additionally, when you factor in the removal of health packs, it also means that you're no longer being punished for making mistakes. These two changes will fundamentally change how the game plays, especially in comparison to the original. Now, notice I said it would make the game play differently, not that it would necessarily be bad. You see, especially the health system, this has been a change that has been in Halo since Halo 2, and frankly, I prefer it. Now, in regards to sprint, I feel like this is something that Halo Infinite has, for the most part, already fixed. You see, Halo Infinite sprint was a very, very minor speed boost, and so for the most part, it wouldn't fundamentally change the way the game is played. Additionally, in regards to sprint to fire speed, your gun would come up almost instantly, which would remove that part of the argument. You see, there's still one last issue with sprint that I haven't talked about yet, and that's atmosphere. You see, Halo is a very beautiful game, and its intent was to have you stop and, well, smell the roses per se. And the thing is, with sprint, it allows the player to just rush through everything. Now, the thing is that, of course, you don't have to do it, but because it's an option, a lot of fans are going to skip ahead without realizing that it's beneficial to stop and take in the atmosphere. Another thing too that's being left out in the conversation with this game is the fact that there's an actual toggle in the settings to disable sprint. Now, here's what I propose. By default, have sprint off, and have the option for the players to turn it on. This would be the best of both worlds. It would allow players to take in the game's atmosphere, but if they want to rush through, they can. On the note of atmosphere, the game's visuals are absolutely fantastic. And to be fair, this is an area that I really wasn't worried about. Unreal Engine 5 is known for its stunning visuals, but it's not exactly known for its performance. And while, to be fair, I haven't gotten my hands on with the game yet, from the gameplay they released, there were a few stutters here and there. Now, to be fair, there's still a full year left of development before the game comes out, so there's a lot more they can do for optimization, but it's still a concern that I have for launch, and especially seeing how the performance is for a lot of other big budget remakes and just overall game titles, it's still a very valid concern. Now, jumping back to atmosphere, let's talk about art design. One of the many issues that Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary had was that a lot of its art design simply didn't understand what the original Halo was trying to convey. Here we are, over a decade later, and it feels like we're making a lot of the same mistakes, albeit not nearly as bad. A good example of this issue is it feels like a lot of the models and overall art design are straight up pulled from Halo Infinite. Now, as I've said numerous times to a lot of my buddies, Halo Infinite doesn't look bad. In fact, it's arguably one of my favorite designed Halo games out of the 343 era. The problem is that it doesn't look like Halo Combat Evolved. The developers have made numerous statements saying how they want to keep the visuals of the game authentic and true to the original. But the thing is that Infinite just didn't look the same. So the thing is, we run into an issue where expectations are not being set properly. If they want the game to be authentic to the original, a lot of changes are going to need to be made. But if the goal is to keep the game more in line with the newer Halo games, then they need to set that expectation from the start. Now, you're probably wondering, why is this even an issue to begin with? Well, a big part of it is the art design in the original was very intentional. You see, Halo Infinite and a lot of the 343 Forerunner designs are very shiny and clean, and that just simply wasn't what the Forerunner designs were in the original Halo games. They were meant to look abandoned, dirty, and decayed due to their exposure to the elements. The new, more shiny aesthetic is a far cry from what it used to be. While this design does still work well for the interiors of Forerunner structures, I still prefer the old design for exteriors, so it would be nice if the art team can make another pass-through for the exteriors of Forerunner structures and make them a little bit more in line with the original Halo. On this note, I would also love the art team to go back and take another look at Covenant designs. As I've said, I don't necessarily hate the design of the Covenant for Halo Infinite, but I still prefer the older designs. They just had a more simple silhouette and simple design that made them more recognizable. There's an artist on Twitter named Rythaz who does some absolutely fantastic art in the style of Halo Combat Evolved, and I really feel like the art team should take a look at a lot of these designs and use them for inspiration. Also, you should go check this guy out, he's pretty cool. And he's also doing the artwork for one of the new Halo books, which is also pretty cool. Going back to Covenant designs, another one that stands out as being kind of an issue is the design of the Needler. Now, once again, I'm pretty sure this is just a placeholder, but the thing is that the original Needler felt very alien. and this one just feels way more streamlined. And as I said, and this is going to be kind of a recurring theme, it worked well for Halo Infinite, but it doesn't fit Combat Evolved. Another thing I'm going to throw in here really quickly is it felt like a lot of the animations were kind of janky. Now, I'm not going to harp on this too much because, as I've said, they still have another year in development, and I'm pretty sure a lot of these are still work in progress and aren't finalized. So I don't want to critique it too much, especially the fact that it's not done yet. Another thing that I noticed that I kind of took issue with during the gameplay reveal was a lot of the weapon audio. It just felt like it lacked punch and overall weight, and especially considering the original Combat Evolved and how well it did the weapon audio, and personally having some of my favorite weapon audio, I just wish it was just a little bit better. Moving on from this to arguably one of my biggest gripes with the gameplay, and that's the overall HUD and UI design. See, one of the things that I always loved about Halo is the way that it would be very creative in trying to convey information to the player. A good example of this is the elites. As you're actively shooting at them, you can see their shields start to slowly glow until eventually their shields would go down. From here, you could then do damage to them. Additionally, there was also a lot of other visual feedback that helped convey the same information. So why are we using hit markers? I understand that they're commonplace in modern gaming, and I can understand their place in multiplayer shooters, but why are they in a single-player campaign? Especially in Halo, where they've never been needed. Additionally, for some reason, in the first time in the series, they have a lot of button prompts that are just permanently on the menu. A good example of this is showing right trigger to shoot. Yeah, no shit, that's the button to shoot. Why does this need to be on my screen at all times? Now, maybe this is just an accessibility feature. I know that there's a lot of settings you can customize for the HUD, but why is this on by default? It's just something that isn't needed and it's just added clutter. Now, I know a lot of people are upset by the objective markers, and I'm really not. They were in the original Halo. I think my issue is much more the design of them, especially some of the text prompts. They're just really clunky. And it's a very similar issue that I have with the newer Zombies games. Well, sorry, for people who are unfamiliar with Call of Duty Zombies. For some reason, anytime they have a text prompt, they always have this really big backdrop that's very intrusive and takes up a lot of space. And for some reason, this remake appears to have that as well. Now, I know I've been kind of harsh on the HUD, but there is some good. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of accessibility settings and overall customization settings that you can do to the HUD. Now, I would love to know the full extent of this, but it's definitely an interesting idea and a cool step in the right direction. Now, I would also love to see an actual remastered multiplayer. Now, I understand that there's supposed to be an actual multiplayer Halo game coming out, but I still think that Combat Evolved deserves to have its multiplayer remastered at least once. And if we can't get something multiplayer, maybe something cooperative? Not necessarily a zombies mode, but maybe something with the Flood? I don't know, just a cool idea I'm throwing out there. Overall, despite the overall doom and gloom you'll see on the internet, I feel like Halo's future is very bright, and I, for one, am very excited to see where it goes. The team over at Halo Studios seem very passionate about Halo, and I, for one, am looking forward to giving them a chance to prove themselves. And if by some miracle, one of the devs are watching this video, be sure to say hi in the comments. Additionally, I hope that you take my feedback to heart. Additionally, for everybody else, be sure to post your thoughts and opinions down in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what your guys' thoughts are. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that way you never miss an upload. As always, I've been your host Spectre, and I hope you have a wonderful day.